April 1945. The biggest war in history is nearing its end. In 10 extraordinary days, the Nazi Empire will collapse. After 6 years of brutal bloodshed, nearly 50 million people are dead. Millions more are homeless and starving. For 10 individuals trapped in the horror and chaos, these 10 days will shape the rest of their lives. A battle-weary paratrooper is stunned when he stumbles across the Nazis' most ghastly secret. A Russian soldier, part of the largest Soviet army in history, will stop at nothing to conquer Berlin. Beneath the devastated city, a telephone operator is locked in a bunker with Adolf Hitler. He wonders if he'll get out alive. Above them, a 19-year-old girl suffers the savage invasion and prays for salvation. The next 10 days will change their lives and the world forever. "15 meters below the streets of Berlin, Hitler conducts a war which has already been lost. Locked in his concrete command post, the Führer doesn't believe his mighty armies are being crushed by the Allied forces. He won't listen to his generals, who tell him the Allies have now brought the final battle right to his doorstep. In the closing days of World War II, General Eisenhower leads the most powerful military ever assembled under one man. The Allied forces, with troops from 16 different countries, are sweeping west across Germany. From the south, they're pushing up through Mussolini's Italy, and from the east, the largest Russian army in history has overrun Poland and is now surrounding Berlin. Pinned down in his bunker, Hitler cannot see his days are numbered. He's volatile. He still believes his powerful legions will save him. Berlin is a fortress, he declares, and must be defended to the last. He will stay to the bitter end. With him is his telephone operator, Rochus Misch.
It was very depressing down there, and I did not feel at all happy that the head of the unit had posted me to the bunker. I would have preferred not to have done my duty there. When you thought of the steel doors with their heavy handles, you always thought to yourself, who knows if I will ever get out of here again? You tried to stop yourself from thinking like that. You did not want to think so much.
As the Red Army tightens its noose around the German capital, within the city there's a news blackout. People have no idea what's happening. 19-year-old Clara Petacci and her mother depend on the weekly newsreels for information. But all footage is carefully orchestrated by Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi Minister for Public Enlightenment and Propaganda. This film portrays the Russians as a savage horde, out to murder, rape, and steal.
My mother always said, oh, this cannot happen in Berlin, never. In the country, yes, but not here. She was wrong.
The Russians are bent on taking brutal revenge for the atrocities the Germans committed at Stalingrad. For Gerda, it's an anxious waiting game. She knows they will be conquered, but by whom?
We hoped that the Americans or the British would come. This was our hope. And they could have come, you know. They stood at Elbe until the Russians came around Berlin, but this was an arrangement. If they wanted, they could have come first.
By April 25th, Berlin is completely surrounded. As planned, The Red Army links up with the Americans at the River Elbe, 60 miles southwest of the city. Europe is now cut in half. It's the beginning of a division that will last for more than 40 years. Berliners can hear the rumble of war getting closer and closer, but they have no idea of the awesome firepower aimed right at them. 2.5 million Soviet troops, more than 40,000 guns and mortars, over 6,000 tanks, and 8,500 aircraft are ready to storm the city. The Russians have amassed the greatest military machine in their history to crush the capital of the Third Reich. On the streets is a vicious fight to the death. All experienced German troops have been sent to the front lines, and now mere boys, some as young as 12, are being enlisted to defend the city itself. Deserters will be executed. The Russians blast their way into Berlin's northern and eastern suburbs. Vasily Ustukov, a gunner with the 150th Rifle Division, is at the forefront of the assault. His goal is the Reichstag, Hitler's government house. Stalin wants a Soviet flag flying from its roof before the May Day parade in Moscow. The man who plants it there will win everlasting glory.
Our division, number 150, we were asked to take the Reichstag. We had to get to it first. We reached the outskirts of Berlin from the east. I lost a lot of my men in the fierce battle. The Germans sent everyone they could to stop us. I was shot at from houses, from windows, and my job was to take out those who were shooting.
As the fighting rages in the suburbs, ordinary people try to survive in what is left of Berlin. 1.5 million people have lost their homes after more than 13,000 tons of bombs have hit the city. 70% of its buildings have been destroyed. There's no gas, no electricity, no running water. Later that day, Gerda Pettersson goes out to fetch water from the neighborhood pump. What little information gets through the Nazi news blackout, she picks up here from neighbors and from leaflets dropped by Russian and American planes, urging Berliners to surrender.
Was ist das? Ein Flugzeug hat Tausende abgeworfen. Es steht, dass der Krieg verloren ist. Wir müssen kapitulieren, um uns selbst zu retten.
Fang lieber schon an, Russisch zu lernen.
Ist der Ivan schon da?
Ich habe doch gesagt, du sollst nicht aufheben. Sie hängen sich, wenn sie dich sehen.
Ich werde Englisch lernen. Die Amerikaner werden uns retten.
But the Americans are not coming. Gerda has no way of knowing it, but their fate has already been sealed. The Soviet bear is at their door. The Soviet bombardment of Berlin continues, but Berliners are in the dark about how fast the noose is tightening around them. Food is so scarce that just to survive is a risk.
People told us there's a train on the railway with food, and I was no hero, but I want to have some food for my family, so I hurried and rushed across the street, and there was a big hole in this. And see, I jumped down, and there was the train and all the people there to find things to eat. Suddenly, Russian aeroplanes came shooting against us. And I saw some falling down, and I thought, no, I don't want to lose my young life this way. And I grasped a small parcel and throw rode out of the train, and I saw a young woman laying down there, hurted and full of blood. And what did she have in her hand was only paper for the water closet. So I rushed and hurried home. Then later on, I saw what's inside the parcel. It was food for air forces with choco, cola, cushions with malt.
Though Gerda dreams of rescue by American GIs, it is this little ration pack that will save her life. The citizens in the German capital may pray for deliverance by the West, but nearly 500 miles away, in the French schoolhouse which serves as the Allied headquarters, the Supreme Allied Commander, General Eisenhower, has other plans. He's already decided to keep his troops out of Berlin.
Well, Eisenhower's a careful strategist, and much to Churchill and Montgomery's fury, he's already decided that a race for Berlin between British and American troops will sour their alliance. He knows that attacking Berlin will also expose the Western Allies to unacceptably high casualties from both the German defenders on the one hand and friendly Soviet fire from the east on the other. And in any case, he'll later have to pull out of East Berlin and the country around it in keeping with the post-war division of Germany already agreed with Stalin.
Eisenhower is getting disturbing reports about a Nazi plan to carry on the war from Hitler's retreat near Berchtesgaden, high in the Bavarian Alps. This is another reason Berlin is off the table. Eisenhower needs his forces for a potentially long and bloody battle in the mountains. And so he makes one of the most momentous decisions at the war's end. Berlin will be left to the Soviets.
It's a decision that will haunt him for the rest of his life, but more importantly, it will have terrible consequences for the people of Berlin for the next 50 years.
It's not only Berliners who are shocked at being abandoned to the Russians. Eisenhower's ally, Field Marshal Montgomery, British commander of Allied forces in northern Germany, is equally appalled and frustrated. Unlike Eisenhower, Montgomery believes it's vital to gain control over Europe's main cities before the Soviets do. He doesn't trust them. The Russians have already installed puppet regimes in the countries they liberated. Therefore, Berlin became a prime objective for Montgomery. When Eisenhower overrules him, it's another blow to their already rocky relationship.
My father thought Eisenhower was a very great man. As a person, as a diplomat, as a statesman, he had a huge regard for him. When Eisenhower decided to take personal control, which my father thought was an error, he thought it was either should be him commanding the Americans or Bradley commanding the whole operation, both of whom have experienced battlefield commanders, Monty and Bradley. But Eisenhower decided to keep the two fronts separate and advance along both fronts, with Monty in the north and Bradley in the south. The problem with going forward on all fronts is there wasn't the logistic ability to be able to do that.
Montgomery's new objective is to cross the Elbe River and push north to the Baltic Sea. His mission is to seal off the German forces in Scandinavia, but more importantly, to prevent the Soviets from reaching Denmark. He knows that once in Denmark, the communists would control the entire Baltic. A British commando, Cliff Morris, is with Montgomery's forces pushing towards the Baltic. It's been a long, tough year for him. He was among the very first to come ashore in France on D-Day. He keeps a daily diary.
We've been staying here for 10 days, during which we've been having a smashing time, getting well fed, plenty of rest and recreation. The intelligence officer crossed the Elbe under cover of a white flag and entered the town of Lauenburg. He approached the enemy and asked them to surrender. They refused, as the town was being held by the SS. They said they would fight for it. We have given them 48 hours to think it over before action begins.
The Allies are crushing the German army all across Europe. They've cut off their food and fuel. Without these staples, the Nazi war machine is powerless. Now the war itself is grinding to a halt. However, in the Netherlands, the war has reached a stalemate. The Canadian First Army has liberated most of the country, but the Germans still occupy the west. To punish the Dutch for aiding their allies, the Nazis have cut off their food supplies. Nearly 1,000 people are dying each day of starvation. If the Allies attack, The Germans threatened to blow up the North Sea dikes, flooding the country and killing thousands more. Eisenhower is trying to negotiate a truce with the German command in Holland, so the Allies can airlift food to the starving Dutch. Without an agreement, the Germans could shoot down any aircraft coming in. Captain Farley Mowat is an intelligence officer with the 1st Canadian Liberation Brigade in Holland.
My job was looking for German weapons, weapons of mass destruction, as we'd say today. I didn't find too many, as we say today.
Ken Cottam, a fellow intelligence officer, has a daring idea. Working independently, they can speed up the truce negotiations with the Germans. But what he proposes is not only illegal, but extremely dangerous.
Cottam decided that we should do something really extravagant and interesting, and it was just at the end of the war. We knew that the whole thing was going to be over shortly. So what he arranged, actually, was through some friend of his in the German intelligence, a safe conduct to cross into the German-occupied part of Holland and go to the headquarters of the German district regional commander, General Blaskowitz, in Hilversum. And he wanted me to go along, too.
With command structures breaking down and increasingly disrupted communications, many regional German units are trying to cut their own deals.
Ken has persuaded senior staff that it's imperative to establish direct talks between ourselves and General Blaskowitz. He's just received a message from the general saying that he'd like to discuss a separate truce with the Allies. We're going to cross over German lines tomorrow. I am more than a little nervous.
Their secret journey into the heart of Nazi territory will have consequences far beyond their wildest ambitions. In Italy, the war has left the country in chaos. The regime of the fascist dictator, Hitler's ally Benito Mussolini, has collapsed. The Allies are battling their way north, defeating German forces with the help of local armed resistance groups. Convoys of defeated Nazis and their sympathizers are trying to escape the country. It's early morning. Urbano Lazzaro is a member of a resistance group that has taken control of a small town on the shores of Lake Como. He's about to be part of an event that will engrave his name in history. The group's leader has news that a German convoy is approaching, making for neutral Switzerland. Apparently it's carrying a very important passenger. The resistance has agreed with the Germans that they can stop and search all vehicles. Germans can leave, but any Italians trying to sneak out will be arrested. The fascists must answer for their crimes.
Documenti, andiamo.
Urbano Lazzaro is about to catch a very big fish.
Documenti, andiamo. Camerata. Eccellenza. Cavaliere Benito Mussolini. Nel nome del popolo italiano io ti arresto.
Io non ho fatto niente.
It was a real shock to see this powerful man who commanded 54 million Italians reduced to nothing. It really struck me.
In the car following the convoy, they find an Italian woman. She is Mussolini's mistress, Clara Petacci. The resistance holds them prisoner in the town hall, along with other members of his government, also caught, trying to escape. Later, Mussolini and his mistress are transferred to a more secure location up in the hills. The plan is to take them to Milan to stand trial.
At school, they had taught us to adore Mussolini. They presented him to us as a divine being. He was the destiny of our nation. He was going to save Italy and the Italian people and give us back the glory days of the Roman Empire. Then I began to see the truth was very different. I started to see the injustice. For example, my father was ill with diabetes and needed insulin injections. But the fascists took his insulin away. He was all alone because my mother was in prison. When I got home, his legs had become gangrenous. He died that August.
Well, Mussolini's capture actually doesn't make that much difference to the Allies' campaign in Italy, and the reason is that their recent offensive, backed by an uprising of starving Italian civilians, already has the Germans on the run. Also, some of the senior German commanders in Italy have actually been negotiating with the Allies for some time, and they're on the verge of signing an unofficial surrender. Mussolini knows this, and he also knows that without his German backers, his fascist regime can't survive.
Any satisfaction General Eisenhower feels over the Italian campaign is overshadowed by two grave concerns. Can he prevent the German SS from making a bloody last stand in the Bavarian Alps? And more urgently, can he secure a truce with the German command in Holland, so he can start airlifting in food to alleviate the growing famine? More are dying each day. What Eisenhower doesn't know is that in Holland, two Canadians, Farley Mowat and Ken Cottam, have already embarked on a secret, dangerous mission behind enemy lines. These two officers are attempting to speed up the truce that will mean food for the starving Dutch.
Unlikely as it may seem, I'm presently sitting in a very large greenhouse. Believe it or not, this is the Resistance headquarters. Who would have conceived of putting their headquarters in a greenhouse? Clever, really, as it is surely the last place the Germans would have looked for it. Though with all the glass being rattled by the thump of grenades exploding nearby, I'm beginning to wish I was back in the Germans' camp.
The day before, the two Canadians had driven across no man's land to meet the German commander-in-chief, General Blaskowitz.
Well, it was very scary driving into German-occupied territory before the truce was established. I mean, you really didn't know what the hell was going to happen. But it was also wildly exhilarating. If you had enough rum in you, and I always made sure that I did, you could manage it all right. I would hate to have done it sober. But once or twice we ran into German columns, and one was an SS column in their black uniforms, looking very, very frightening. The recognition of the fact that this wasn't a German car, and it wasn't filled with German soldiers, came over these guys. It was like a comic film. You could almost see the expressions change in their face, you know? Maybe they were just too surprised.
Mowat and Cottam survive the harrowing trip to the German headquarters and are delivered at gunpoint to the icy German commander, General Blaskowitz. The two officers have no idea what might happen next. One false move, and they could be shot. But it appears the Germans respect their nerve.
The Germans fed us huge plates of army stew, which they then apologized for because it was mainly horse. Things are tough all over. Perhaps to compensate, they then plied us with plum brandy. As Ken spoke fluent German, we decided he should be the one to talk to the general.
They were very courteous. There was a lot of saluting, introducing one to another. Oh, and I remember one guy, he would be an Oberleutnant, who got very friendly and produced his sister's photograph from his handbook, from his pocketbook, and showed it to me and said, "Is she not lovely?" And I said, yes, she's beautiful. "When you're in Dresden, you may look her up." He didn't do it, of course, but never mind. It was a nice thought.
Keep it coming. Go on. There we go. That's good. Save some for yourself. I'm not that cheap, huh?
A bottle of brandy later, Cottam and General Blaskowitz return. He has agreed to a truce. But they can't count this a success just yet. The truce still has to go up the line to the German High Command. Blaskowitz has taken a huge risk.
He must have persuaded Blaskowitz that the truce was inevitable and that if he moved now, he would gain some brownie points. So the story is that that little expedition of ours may have shortened the war in Holland by a day or two, maybe. I really thought when we went in there that that Cottam had bitten off more than he could chew, that we were going to get scratched, we were going to get chewed up.
When we left General Blaskowitz's headquarters, I thought we'd be heading back to our own side. But not Ken. We went the other way, to Amsterdam, deep inside Nazi-occupied territory, where we made contact with the local resistance group.
That's a negative.
Ken and Colonel Michaels, their leader, are now trying to radio news of the truce back to our own headquarters as fast as possible.
Time is running out for the thousands of starving Dutch. The truce negotiated with General Blaskowitz must be approved by both sides. Moet and Cottam can only sit and wait. Millions of Soviet soldiers, backed by thousands of tanks, rockets, and aircraft, are reducing the German capital to rubble. They've conquered 3/4 of the city. Vasily Ustigov and his comrades battle from house to house as they move ever closer to the goal, the Reichstag. But it's a mission that comes at a high cost. On average, over these 10 days, the Russians will suffer 12 casualties every single minute. Many Soviet soldiers, fueled by alcohol, a hatred of the Germans, and a desire for revenge, unleash a frenzy of killing, looting, and raping.
Our attitude towards Hitler and what he did in Russia was quite obvious. The atrocities his army committed against civilians were terrible. They burned, bombed, and executed civilians in great numbers. They killed about 18.5 million civilians. I am often asked about how we treated the locals, especially the women. I can't say beyond a shadow of doubt that nobody did anything wrong, especially in the rear guard. But I have to say that our commander, General Zhukov, was not the type of person to let his troops go wild. Our orders were very strict, and we were very closely supervised by political and counterintelligence officers. If someone got caught, they were severely punished. There might have been isolated instances in the battalion, but in my platoon I never witnessed any of this. Of course, being a realistic person, I can't say nothing ever happened, but I never experienced any of this.
Gerda Pettersson is hiding from the Russians in a cellar with her family and neighbors.
During the day it was very quiet outside. You heard nothing. No. There have been no German soldiers. No, nothing was around us. And it was so quiet. And suddenly in the afternoon, the first tank we heard rolling along the street. And we all have been quiet in our cellar, sitting there, didn't know what will come. And then quiet again. And suddenly something shooting, I don't know what is, and the first Russian word, "Stoy." Stoy! I never forget the first Russian soldier I saw, Soviet soldier I saw in our small door of our cellar. It was a Mongol. I still see him.
The Russians grab whatever of value they can lay their hands on and take away the only two men in the group. But prisoners and trinkets are not all they're after.
Отведи этих мужиков наверх. Мужиков на мудаков. Фу ты, ну ты, палки гнуты, да у нас тут рассадник. А? Ну что? Что, бабоньки, кто хочет солдатского тела? Что? Ну что, хотите солдатского тела, а? Хочешь? Ну, пошли со мной. Пошли со мной, бабонька. Ну что ты? Девочку строили? Давай, пошли со мной! Что такое? Что такое? Что, тебе морда не вышел? Морда не вышел, а? Что такое? Пошли со мной. За немца хочешь пойти? Пошли. Ах ты, сука, когда бы вам тут всем нахер? Петуха! Я, блин, вернусь, и мы еще поговорим. Поговорим, девочки мои. Хорошие, а? Милые мои золотые. Все, будем здесь стоять. Иди сюда, Петруха! Идем. Пошел, давай. Давай, стрелять.
She's lucky. Her baby's crying has protected her. But when the soldiers next return, the situation will be very different. As the Russians rampage through Berlin, 15 meters below the city, Hitler compares himself to his hero, Frederick the Great of Prussia. He waits in vain for his armies to save the Reich from the barbarians. Yesterday he turned down an escape plan from General Weidling, the commander of the Berlin garrison. Having cut himself off from reality, he refuses to flee. He wants to fall heroically at the head of his troops. With his armies defeated and in tatters, it is yet another sign of his weak grasp of the situation. Rokas Misch, his telephone operator, is one of the few people left in the bunker. He begins to fear for his own life.
I thought I'd never get out of there alive. It was like a concrete coffin for me, the death chamber I could no longer leave. I didn't know what would happen to the bunker.
April 28th, 10 days to victory. The resistance dragged Mussolini and his mistress from the farmhouse where they were held overnight. The plan is to take them to Milan to stand trial for their crimes.
Portala via. Sono indietro.
No, no,
Sono indietro.
Benito, Benito, Benito.
Ammazzala! E anche a lui! E anche a lui!
Urbano Lazzaro, the young anti-fascist who arrested Mussolini, is dismayed by this turn of events.
I only found out later what had happened. If I had been there, I would not have agreed to the killing. I wanted a public trial. Then, of course, a death sentence. But everything done legally, properly and fairly. I wanted a return to the rule of law.
The resistance take the bodies of Mussolini, Clara Petacci and the other fascists to Milan. People vent the hatred they weren't allowed to express when the dictator was in power. For historians, how Mussolini died is one of the great controversies of the war.
Well, there's been a lot of debate over the exact details of Mussolini's execution, and only recently there have been new claims that they were in fact killed by 2 Italians working for British intelligence, the partisans then claiming responsibility for political gain. The reason apparently was that Mussolini had some compromising letters from Churchill offering him a separate piece of the Allies. If this had been true, it would have been a serious breach of the Allies' agreement to seek only the unconditional surrender of all Axis powers. And when Mussolini's government collapsed, of course, Churchill had to get those letters back in case the desperate dictator was tempted to use them as blackmail.
That same day, in the middle of a greenhouse in Nazi-occupied Amsterdam, Farley Mowat waits for news of the first food airlift to take off from England. He hopes their hard-won truce with the Germans has opened the way for the badly needed humanitarian relief.
Last night we received confirmation that the ceasefire we negotiated with the Germans is now official. The celebrations went on all night. The entire populace is celebrating the coming liberation from a diet of potatoes and tulip bulbs. Now all they have to agree are how and where the food is to be delivered.
But their efforts are now frustrated by powers beyond their control.
Just came in over the wire. It's not good news. Food drop's been postponed. Bad weather in England.
That's typical.
In Holland, the war is ending in a wave of bitter retribution. The Dutch resistance shows no mercy for those who collaborated with the Germans. Those caught are severely punished by the resistance for betraying their country and their fellow citizens.
An unknown number of thousands did end up in concentration camps as a result of being betrayed by collaborators. Some collaborators were shot arbitrarily. Most were dealt with in much lesser violent fashion, but they were identified. Their belongings were seized. A lot of them had equipment they'd got stolen through their contacts with the German army. So it was a kind of a revenge operation.
As the German capital braces itself for the final reckoning, every day the war drags on, brings more pain and suffering. With most of the men away, fighting or dead, the women of Berlin are in continual danger from the Soviet invaders. Marauding soldiers kick in their doors. If they must go out, they make themselves as unattractive as possible by dirtying their faces. Gerda and her family find out the hard way. It doesn't always work.
My sister-in-law, she lived with her parents several streets away from us. She was brought to us, and she was hurted here at her throat because the night before she was raped several times by Russian soldiers, and her parents and she decided to end their lives and went up to hang themselves. And both parents soon have been dead, but she was saved by a neighbor and brought to us.
Ты ко мне приходи, а он все не сделает, я ничего не понимаю.
of April. In the dead of night, with 9 days to go, a mysterious visitor appears in the Führer's bunker.
He was a complete stranger, not someone who came to meetings. My friend told me that he was an official from the registry office. The Führer was going to get married. I was taken aback and said, "What?" And he said, "Yes, the Führer is going to marry."
In the very early hours of the morning, with the Russian army only a few hundred yards away, and the bunker shaking from nearby explosions, Hitler and Eva Braun are married. While Hitler was in his glory, he dismissed marriage. His bride was Germany. But Eva Braun, the photographer's assistant from Bavaria, has stuck by him. Even knowing the danger, she's chosen to come to the bunker and refuses to leave. After years of living in the shadows as his mistress, she's finally won what she's always wanted: recognition. Shortly afterwards, Hitler dictates his last will and testament. In it, he blames the war and Germany's defeat on the Jews, and he exhorts the German people to keep to the principles of National Socialism, especially its racial laws. He assures his people that their 6-year struggle will one day be recognized as the most glorious and valiant manifestation of a nation's will to exist. He appoints Grand Admiral Donitz to succeed him as Germany's leader, to continue the struggle. Not even the death of Adolf Hitler will end the war. In the early hours of the 29th of April in northwest Germany, Montgomery's guns begin pounding the town of Lauenburg across the Elbe River. They provide cover for British commandos to cross over and take the town. From there, they will blaze their way to the Baltic Sea. Crossing the river, Cliff Morris, a No. 6 Commando unit, come under heavy fire from German machine guns. It's one of the fiercest lines of resistance still left. With the war nearly over, no one wants to be among the last to be killed. Having crossed the Elbe River, the British government wants their troops to push east to strengthen their influence over post-war Europe. The British now see the advancing Soviet army as a greater threat than the Germans, who are being defeated on all fronts.
The Russians were playing a different game to what the Allies were. Although it would be fair to say that I don't think we could have achieved the success we had if it hadn't been for the Russians. I mean, the Russians suffered because they were very cavalier. Phenomenal casualties in their operations on the Eastern Front.
The Western Allies are willing to pay the price of Eastern Europe in exchange for the Soviets taking the lion's share of the casualties. But this means little to the men of Commando Unit Number 6. All they know is that each minute they can stay alive brings them that much closer to the end of the war. As the British commandos enter the town of Lauenburg, there are signs of an earlier battle. It looks like the German army has abandoned Lauenburg to the Allies. Perhaps they don't want to get caught between the British and Soviet forces, racing each other towards the Baltic Sea.
When we arrived, we spotted the situation, and we'd spread on either side of the roads, and we hammered on each door as we went past it. And shouted, you know, the blokes who spoke German told them to stay inside and they wouldn't get shot.
Against the thunder and chaos of the war, the stillness of the town is unnerving. Morris's training tells him never to trust the silence.
Grenade! Hand grenade!
They had young ones scouting the streets at night, being ready for being drafted into the line, really. 2 days they would have been in the line, you know, they wouldn't be specially armed or nothing like that, they'd just be fodder, really. So we saved them in a way. We took them back to their local, like what we were police station or barracks, and so they take them inside, they wouldn't get shot. If they came out again, they would be shot, so.
While Commando Cliff Morris and his comrades battle their way north to the Baltic, American paratrooper Clancy Lyle of the 101st Airborne Division is traveling south. He's headed for a showdown with Hitler's elite SS troops in the Alps. En route, they'll stumble upon the most horrific secret of the Nazi regime.